Superhero movies seem to be on the decline at the box office, and it makes you wonder how much superhero fatigue plays into the issue. Are people sick of superhero films or just sick of poorly written films that are pushing certain agendas? Either way, it spells trouble for Blue Beetle, the latest DC hero film from Warner Brothers. Blue Beetle is a fairly obscure character that's had multiple versions over the years, and they've all been pretty derivative of other characters to some degree. The new film features the Jaime Reyes version of Blue Beetle, which was introduced in DC Comics about 20 years ago. He replaces the previous Ted Kord version of the character, another example of race swapping a character, in this case from white to Hispanic. However, I think Blue Beetle is one of the better examples of how you should do a race swap on a superhero. If you're going to do it, this is the way to do it. Do it with a character that is kind of obscure and doesn't have a significant fan base already established. That way, you're not alienating the pre-existing audience. And the Jaime Reyes version of Blue Beetle is actually a pretty good character. I think it was also good because there's no other DC character that has quite the same gimmick that Jaime Reyes does, where he is effectively possessed by a form of alien technology that he can't quite control. Welcome back to Classic Comics, everyone. This is my review of Blue Beetle. There will be spoilers in this review, so you may want to watch the film first if you don't want to be spoiled. So, Jaime Reyes is a young Hispanic man who's just graduated from college and returns home to his family in Palmera City. He's having difficulty getting a good job, even with a degree, but then he's offered a chance to apply for a position at Ford Industries, which is the corporation that pretty much runs Palmera City. The company is run by Victoria Cord, and her company is trying to weaponize a piece of alien technology that looks like a scarab, i.e., a beetle, in order to create high tech soldiers for the military. Victoria's niece, Ginny, who is the daughter of Ted Cord, who previously owned the company before he mysteriously vanished, wants to prevent Victoria from using the scarab in this way because the scarab was important to her father and she knows that he wouldn't approve of this. So she steals the scarab on the same day that Jaime shows up for a job interview, and she asks him to take the scarab home to get it away from Victoria. He does this, and once home, he handles the scarab and it winds up attaching itself to him and transforming him into a superhero. This happens in front of his family, including his mother, father, grandmother, sister, and his uncle Rudy, who is a kind of conspiracy nut slash inventor. After having his body effectively hijacked by the scarab and flying around the city, he returns home where Ginny arrives and she explains that the scarab belonged to her father, who came into possession of it many years ago but couldn't get it to work. Jaime wants the scarab out of him, and Ginny says she knows a place where it could be removed, so they go to the mansion where she was raised. Her mother died when she was very young, and her father vanished many years ago, and the mansion has been abandoned for years. But it turns out Ted Cord had a kind of secret underground lair underneath the mansion. She takes them down there and reveals that her father, Ted Cord, was the Blue Beetle, a superhero who protected Palmera City for many years before he vanished. They hack into Ted's computer system and learn that the scarab was found by Ted's mentor, Dan Garrett, who was the original Blue Beetle, who left it to Ted when he died. The scarab is merging with Jaime's nervous system, and there's pretty much no way to remove it without killing Jaime. Now, Victoria is aware that Jaime helped Ginny steal the scarab, so she sends a security team to the home of the Reyes family to get Jaime, and they capture his family. Then Jaime arrives and fights them, and he gets caught. And as he's taken away, his father has a heart attack and dies. Ginny knows where Victoria is taking him, and she takes the family back to the mansion and shows them the bug, which is this kind of airship that Ted Cord had invented. And they all hop in the bug and they fly off to rescue Jaime. and they take the whole family. In fact, it's at this point that we find out that Granny is actually a former communist revolutionary, and she pretty much takes charge of the whole operation. She plans the assault on the villain's lair and all that. Not to mention that there's a lot of high-tech weaponry on board the Bug, and they all arm themselves with it. And Granny grabs this huge friggin' gun, which, if it were real, she probably couldn't even lift. Jaime's being held on this island, and they arrive to attack the place. While that's going on, Victoria's having the source code for the Scarab downloaded into her main henchman, a soldier named Carapax, and he becomes this kind of low-rent Iron Man in an armored suit that's powered by the Scarab's source code. This process is damaging Jaime's nervous system or something. I'm not really sure, to be honest, and he starts to die. But then he sees his father in the afterlife, and his father tells him, "No, Jaime, it's not your time. You have to go back," that sort of thing. Jaime wakes up and breaks free of this machine they have him hooked up to, and then he and Carapax have this final showdown while his family pretty much blows up the whole place and kills all of Victoria's henchmen. Carapax is defeated, and then we see this flashback that shows us that he lost his mother as a kid and was gang pressed into the military when he was still very young. And then he stepped on a landmine and had his body kind of blown up and then rebuilt. So he's got a lot of trauma, basically. And then he commits suicide by detonating himself, and he takes Victoria with him. In the aftermath, Jenny takes charge of Cord Industries and offers to rebuild the family home, which was wrecked by Cord's soldiers, and it ends there. We also get a mid credit sequence that teases that Ted Cord is actually still alive and may return at some point, assuming that this gets a sequel, which I wouldn't bet on. So, the main problem this movie has, I think, is that there have been so many superhero films in recent years that this movie feels very much has the feel of a been there, done that already. This plot is actually very similar to the first Ant-Man movie. A superhero has a corporation and he has access to this special rare technology. The company is then usurped by the main villain, who then wants to weaponize the technology and sell it to the military. It's the same basic plot. And there's even a daughter of the original hero who wants to prevent that from happening and is kind of working from the inside of the company to stop it. Aside from the characters being all Hispanic, pretty much, there's nothing here that you haven't already seen. Blue Beetle feels kind of like an Iron Man knockoff. Another issue this movie has is the villains, and I've talked about this sort of thing before. I remember once watching Siskel and Ebert, and they talked about how in Bond movies, Bond doesn't really change. Bond is Bond from one movie to another, unless obviously if there's a different actor who comes in. But as a result, really, it's kind of the villains who really elevate Bond movie or make it really good, right? And superhero movies have kind of a similar issue. The heroes don't really change a lot from movie to movie, so it's really the villains that kind of make the movie stand out or elevate it. And that's the problem with this movie. The villains in this movie are pretty boring. Susan Sarandon seems to be phoning it in, and the guy that plays Carapax, he does an okay job, and he just comes across as a pretty stock evil goon right up until he dies. The cast, for the most part, is okay. Jolo Maraduena, hope I said that right, is good in the role of Jaime, and his family is likable for the most part. And the film actually does show us a positive father figure who isn't a buffoon or a moron. Jaime's father's a good man and he's a loving father, and he has wisdom to share with his son. And it's nice to see a positive patriarchal figure in a film, but I can't help thinking that if Blue Beetle were a white character, you would not get a positive father figure like this. The father would be absent, or he'd be an idiot, and the mother would be the one who's really in charge. This movie doesn't have the usual telltale signs of wokeness that we've grown accustomed to in these sorts of films. The main hero isn't being deconstructed or humiliated in some way. There's no black lesbian who's been thrust to the forefront and mocks or lectures the main hero. But this is less a function of the movie not being woke and more a function of the entire cast already being Hispanic, except for Susan Sarandon. So there's no white male hero for them to tear down to begin with. They've already replaced him. And Carapax isn't even a villain for Jaime anyway, really. He's a Ted Kord villain. This is part of the problem of bringing obscure heroes to the scene. They often don't have good villains to fight, and the villains in this movie are not very memorable. The movie also repeatedly champions communism in a low key way. And then there's some of the comments that the director has made that make it pretty clear where he's coming from politically. These sops to communism are pretty small, and I don't think they ruin the movie, but it's definitely there. Overall, Blue Beetle is a mediocre superhero film that doesn't really impress you in any particular way. If you want to get out of the heat of the summer for a while and see a movie, I mean, I guess you can do worse. But I would definitely advise seeing a matinee. Don't pay full price for this thing if you're going to see it. I'll give Blue Beetle 2 scarabs out of 5. Let me know what you thought of Blue Beetle in the comments, and please like this video before you leave, and sub to the channel, and while you're at it, please check out some of my other videos, and I'll see you all next time. Thanks for watching.